Coming up on Network Africa, it might not be dominating the front pages, but the crisis in Burundi is far from over as 4 people are murdered in fresh unrest in the capital, Bujumbura. Then, according to the United Nations, 850,000 people in Somalia are at risk of facing food insecurity. And later on in our Africa Tech segment, we take a look at internet challenges familiar to Africa. Hello there and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. Just when we thought things were starting to look up in Burundi, we just got confirmation that at least 4 people have died in renewed clashes in the capital, where tensions remain relatively high following President Pierre Nkurunziza's controversial re-election. According to police and witnesses, clashes erupted overnight in several parts of the Central African nation's capital, Bujumbura, with the night marked with sporadic gunfire and explosions. Police are putting the blame on armed insurgents for the violence. The chaos began when President Pierre Nkurunziza expressed his desire to run for a 3rd term, which is not only a clear breach of the constitution, but also the Arusha peace deal, which ended a civil war in 2005. The president is currently serving a 3rd term, but the cost has been hundreds of thousands of Burundians who have fled to neighboring countries and dozens of lives which have been lost in the process. Now, way before the crisis in Burundi began, the international community has tried not only to dissuade the president from running for a 3rd term, but has also urged him to compromise for peace. Let's take a quick look at other roles which the international community has played so far in this crisis. Now, just before it began, the United States warned President Nkurunziza not to seek a 3rd term because of what it foresaw. And travel warnings were also issued to avoid traveling to Burundi. The elections were not monitored by the international community. Results were not deemed credible, free or fair. And the United Nations and African Union also urged Burundi to shun violence. The most recent is the United Nations Security Council, which has urged Burundi to open talks in order to end the crisis. Well, Mr. Auriemma, who is an African news analyst, has been monitoring the situation all the way from London, and he joins us right now on the program. Mr. Auriemma, thank you very much. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good to be here.
Yes. Now, it seems like a case of 1 step forward and 2 steps back. What do you think the future holds for Burundi?
Well, I think that's the big question, isn't it? It's interesting you put it as 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. It's difficult to see what the step forward has been. No concession has been made by Nkurunziza to any of the demands and requests made by international agencies, including the East African community, to change his trajectory. It looks as if he is imposing an increasing degree of censorship and oppression of opposition, much as we thought he might. And the exodus from his country, particularly of the better educated journalists and technicians, has accelerated.
Now, Mr. Auriemma, the international community has urged President Nkurunziza to dialogue, especially the United Nations Security Council. Do you deem that a crucial step? And if so, do you think that President Nkurunziza will actually dialogue?
Very good question. I think, yes, it is an important step. It is an important development. I mean, if you look at the statements that have been made within the last couple of days by very important agencies like the United Nations Council for Refugees, the Human Rights Organization, FIDH, and even the State Department of the United States, they're all becoming more insistent and more imperative in their requirements that Nkurunziza start to behave in accordance with the Arusha Accord reached some 15 years ago, and which he has violated almost consistently up to recently.
Now,
will he pay any attention? That's the question we need to see.
Well, Mr. Auriemma, analysts and scholars like yourself often trace the events which are playing out in Burundi to be an illiteracy problem. Do you care to explain?
That's an interesting one, because again, you see, you have a vast majority of the population of Burundi who are apparently disempowered, uneducated, and almost passive in the face of government oppression and brutality. And they really do nothing other than vote where they're told to vote, or run when the situation gets hot. The intellectual, the intellectual minority, who probably constitute no more than about 5% of Burundi population, are largely targeted for oppressive measures by the government, and of course they flee the country. You see, what Nkurunziza wants is a completely compliant and passive population, and I think he's on his way to achieving that.
Now, any final words before I let you go, Mr. Auriemma, because we have to try to look at a possible way forward. What do you deem that to be?
Well, I think there are two things that are going to happen. I think the International Criminal Court is going to start to name names of people who are required to appear before it to answer criminal charges of human rights abuse. And I think the United States will start to add leverage to sanctions against particularly the leadership of Burundi at the present time. This is to hurt them in the pocket, and this is where our African leadership tends to feel pain more than anywhere else. So I think you can see that there's going to be more pressure put on Burundi to conform to international expectations and requirements of civilized standards.
Well, Mr. Auriemma, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you as always. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Cynthia. Thank you.
Mr. Auriemma speaking with us from London. He's an African news analyst. Still to come on Network Africa. According to the United Nations, 850,000 people in Somalia are at risk of facing food insecurity.